The old bridge in Savannah. When night falls over Savannah, this coastal city doesn't quite sleep. The cobblestone streets still echo faint footsteps, perhaps from someone who walked them hundreds of years ago. And by the riverbank, where tugboats cut silently through the dark water, an old bridge still stands, its rusted iron frame stretched quietly across the river like a hyphen between the present and something long since lost to the shadows. That bridge is no longer in use. They built a bigger one, taller, gleaming with electric light. But the old bridge remains like a night watchman, like a keepsake of this city. A place that once witnessed farewells, promises, and all the things never spoken aloud. There's a small legend people in Savannah whisper when night comes. They say if someone wanders onto the old bridge at exactly midnight, they might stumble upon a piece of the past, something time has left behind. Not ghosts, nothing frightening, just a memory's silhouettes, whispers from long ago. I first heard the story from an old man at Chippewa Square who sold watercolor paintings under the oaks. He said, "Ever crossed the old bridge on a rainy night, son? Sometimes the Savannah sky opens up without warning, and that bridge, it comes alive. The people who once stood there, they return. Not to haunt, just to wait for something that never finished." I didn't believe him, but I couldn't forget either. One night, after a late shift at the old bookstore, I walked along the river. A crescent moon hung low in the sky like a silver blade, and the bridge, the old bridge, appeared in the fog. I don't know why, but I stepped onto it. The wooden planks creaked beneath my feet, slick with moss, and the wind off the water cut through me like the chill of a forgotten dream. Halfway across, I stopped. The city behind me seemed to fade away, leaving only the sound of water brushing the shore. And then, I saw her, a girl, brown hair dancing in the wind, wearing a worn white dress, standing by the railing, holding a small notebook. She didn't look at me, just lifted her face toward the moon for a long, quiet moment. Then she spoke. "Have you ever waited for someone here?" I froze. Her voice didn't echo like it came from here and now. It sounded like memory itself. I had never seen her before, yet something about it felt familiar, like I'd been here at another time, in another life. I asked, "Who are you?" She smiled gently, flipped a page in the notebook and said, "Some promises never become real, but the place remembers, keeps the echo. This bridge is one of those places." She showed me the notebook, just lines of ink smudged by water, hurried words. "Tomorrow, if you come, I'll sing you the song I never finished. If not, let it stay here on this old bridge." Before I could say a word, she stepped into the mist and faded, like she had never existed. The moon still hung in the sky, the wind still blew, and the bridge returned to silence. I looked down at the notebook in my hands, empty. Since that night, I've come back often to the old bridge in Savannah, not hoping to see her again, not searching for answers, just because when I stand there under the night sky, among the wind and the flowing river, it feels like someone's listening. That bridge is not just rusted iron left behind. It's memory. It's the words left unsaid. It's the melody that was never sung. And if one night you ever find yourself passing through Savannah, try to visit that old bridge. Maybe, in the fleeting beat between two heartbeats, you'll hear someone calling your name from a past you never lived, but somehow still remember. The Restless Souls, Savannah, a city of moss-draped oaks, low-hanging amber streetlights, and the distant clatter of horse-drawn carriages echoing like ghosts from the past. Here, the past never truly lies still beneath the dust of time, and the old bridge, it still stands, as if it spans not just the river, but also the unseen realms between worlds. I returned to that bridge many times after the night I met the girl. Some nights I just stood still. Others, I walked along the rusted iron railings, listening to the wind whistle through the beams like the whispers of souls that never sleep. Each time I came back, the bridge felt different, not in shape but in spirit, as if each night a different memory awakened. One time, the sky was dry, no moon in sight, just a blur of white fog. I was standing at the foot of the bridge when I saw a young boy curled up near the railing, holding a small wooden boat. He looked about 10, in a faded button-up shirt and worn shorts, hair tousled, eyes clear and wide like still water. I approached him and asked, "Why are you out here all alone?" He didn't look up, just said, "I'm waiting for my dad. He said he'd take me to the ocean on his day off, but he went out on the ship and never came back. They said the boat sank, but I think maybe he just got lost." I knelt beside him, eyeing the little wooden boat, its deck cracked, paint peeling. The boy looked at me and asked softly, "Have you ever been forgotten by someone?" I tried to answer, but my throat closed up. For a moment, I realized that voice, those eyes, they reminded me exactly of my cousin, the one who disappeared 15 years ago in a storm at sea with his father. They found the boat, but not the boy. I was about to say his name, but it was too late. A gust of wind swept through. The fog began to lift, and the boy vanished. Only the little boat remained by the edge of the bridge. I picked it up. It was ice cold, as if pulled from the bottom of the river. After that night, I started writing down everything I saw, the flickering figures, the half-spoken words, the small objects left behind. A broken string of pearls, a letter with no address, a lone high heel. It was as if someone or something was using the bridge as a refuge for unfinished endings. Souls not angry, just unable to leave. They weren't here to scare anyone. They were just waiting. And then, on a late autumn night, I saw the girl with the notebook again, the first one I ever met on the bridge. But this time she wasn't alone. She sat beside an old man with silver hair, dressed in a worn army coat. They didn't speak, just held hands and looked out at the river. When I came closer, she turned and smiled at me. "Thank you. You helped us wait long enough for the one who needed to return." I stood frozen, unable to say a word as the two of them faded slowly into the mist, like fog and moonlight melting together. But strangely, in the spot where they sat, 2 white camellia flowers had bloomed among the moss. I wasn't afraid anymore. I began writing down every story, every life the old bridge in Savannah had kept safe. People started calling me the storyteller by the bridge, though few believed my tales were real. But sometimes strangers would stop by, leaving scraps of paper, handkerchiefs, or notes that read, "If someone sees him, tell him I'm still waiting. That rainy night, I forgot to say I'm sorry. I'll come back, even if only once." The old bridge remains silent, but every night I still hear footsteps, light as the wind, soft as memory. Maybe one day, I too will become an echo on the bridge. But until then, I'll keep waiting, not out of fear of being forgotten, but because here, some stories are still waiting to be told. The song that was never played. Some nights in Savannah aren't like the others. Those are the nights when the wind blows upriver from the ocean, carrying the scent of salt and a sound faint as singing. When the street lamps flicker as if struggling to hold onto their glow in a dream. And those are the nights when the old, weathered bridge, tired and alone, comes alive the most. I was sitting on the wooden railing, next to a small oil lamp. My notebook lay open, the last page nearly full with fragments of stories, whispered messages, tales no one wanted to hear, except me and this bridge. That night began with rain, a fine, quiet rain that came without warning, falling soft like fingertips tapping on water. I was about to stand and head home when I saw a man approaching from the square, tall and thin, wearing a black trench coat, with an old wooden guitar slung over his shoulder, the strap worn, the fabric cover soaked through. He paused at the foot of the bridge, standing still for a moment like he was unsure. Then he stepped forward. Each footfall felt weighted with memory. I didn't call out. I just watched. The man walked to the center of the bridge and unzipped his guitar case. I heard the sound of the zipper, the faint knock of wood on metal, and then silence. He sat down, slowly wiped down the strings, like he was preparing for something important, something sacred, as if every motion held a lifetime. I moved closer, sitting a few feet away. Neither of us spoke. Then he began to play. The melody was unlike anything I'd ever heard. It wasn't folk or classical or modern. It was a blend of lullaby, wind, water, and something unnameable. A sorrowful tune, but not mournful. As if he wasn't just strumming chords, but awakening memories long asleep. Midway through, he paused and closed his eyes. "She wrote the lyrics for this one," he said softly, "but she never sang it. She told me, if you play this just once on that bridge and I hear it, I'll come back." And I understood. "She used to be here," I said quietly. "I know," he replied. He kept playing, his hands trembling in the rain. The notes echoed off the iron beams, slipped through the moss, skimmed across the water. And then, from the other side of the bridge, a voice began to sing, soft as the wind, faint as mist, but real. "If you play the old love song again, on a rainy night, on the bridge long asleep, I'll return not for the past we had, but just to know we once were real." I turned my head. There she was, a girl in a thin coat, hair wet and falling loose, a fabric umbrella in hand. Her eyes shimmered more than the rain. She stepped closer, standing behind the man. She didn't speak, didn't touch him. She just listened. He stopped playing, turned to look. "No blam. No tears." Just a nod, like they both knew what needed to be said had already been spoken. Not in words, but in music. She knelt, slipped a folded piece of paper into his guitar case, and walked away. She didn't look back. Her footsteps faded into the night, blending with the rain. The man sat there for a long while, then rose, cradled his guitar, and turned to leave. Before stepping off the bridge, he placed the paper in my hand and said, "If anyone asks, tell them." The song was finally played, and someone heard it. I opened the note. "My love, I couldn't stay, but I heard the music, and I forgave you, myself, all of it. Thank you to the bridge that brought us together, and gave me a place to finally let go in peace." That song, I wrote it down. Every note, every silence. I'll never play it like he did, but each time I look at it, I still hear the music in my ears. And I believe there are still songs that have never been played, waiting for someone brave enough to strum them under the night on the old bridge in Savannah. The one who wasn't looking for anyone, that bridge, it used to be a place of parting. Now it's a place of return. But not everyone comes back to meet someone. Some people come only to forget themselves. I know this because I met someone like that on a January night so cold the oak trees along the riverbank seemed to curl up in the dark. There was no rain, no moon, just the chill of the wind and the long exhale of a city that refused to sleep. He arrived slowly, each step heavy, like winter itself was weighing him down. A knit cap pulled low, hands buried deep in his coat pockets, and his eyes lost. I could tell he wasn't local. His shoes still dusted with red earth from far away, his breath tinged with cigarette smoke and a strange kind of liquor. He stepped onto the bridge like he'd heard of it before, but didn't quite believe in what he was looking for. I was sitting there as usual, notebook in hand. He didn't say hello, didn't avoid me, just sat down beside me, leaned back against the wooden railing, and stared at the dark river below. After a long while, he finally spoke. You ever feel like you're running, but you don't even know what you're running from? I didn't answer right away, because honestly, I understood. Sometimes people aren't running from anything. They're just too full, and they need somewhere to not be themselves for a little while, I said. He gave a soft laugh, not a happy one. I left New Mexico at midnight, took nothing with me, didn't call anyone. I walked away from my job, my girlfriend, the little house in the desert, just to sit here on a bridge I've never seen. I nodded, unsurprised. And now what do you want? He stared straight ahead, not at the water, but into some invisible dark space inside himself. I want to sit in a place where no one asks who I am, where I'm from, or where I'm going next. I want to be silent without having to explain it. I want to fade, like someone who was never really here. We sat like two strangers in a dreamlike world. The wind whistled through rusted beams, a low, drawn-out sound like the sigh of time itself. A strong gust flipped through pages of my notebook, and he caught sight of the scribbled lines. She waited, but he never came back. I'm sorry I left first. If you hear that song, please forgive me. He flipped through a few more pages, then closed the notebook. His eyes no longer looked so lost. These people, they were running too? Not all of them, I said. Some were left behind. Some waited forever and no one returned. And some came back only to realize they'd been in the right place at the wrong time. He stayed quiet, then pulled a small, worn photo from his pocket, edges bent, old and sun-bleached. It was a woman in the desert, shielding her eyes from the sun, laughing brightly. He stared at it for a long moment, then, without a word, let it go. The wind carried it over the railing and down into the river. I didn't ask why. Some things, when you let them go, don't need a reason. Before he left, he turned to me and asked, if I came back here in 10 years, would you still be sitting in this spot? I smiled. If the bridge is still standing, if the night still carries wind, if I still have something left unwritten, then maybe I'll still be right here, waiting, not for anyone, just for you to find yourself again. That night, I wrote one more line in the notebook. The one who wasn't looking for anyone still found something. Maybe the old bridge in Savannah isn't where you come to find a lost lover, a friend, or a family member. Maybe it's where you come to meet yourself, the version of you that once was, got lost, or never had the courage to be. And sometimes, one night is enough. The old music box, the old bridge in Savannah has a strange way of drawing out untold stories. Not by making people recall beautiful or sad memories, but by awakening memories that were never lived. Things we didn't know we had forgotten, or things we never knew existed. It was another night, and this time, I met an elderly woman carrying an old music box. She wasn't alone. A young woman, likely her granddaughter, walked beside her, holding a faded fabric bag, walking slowly and looking around as if searching for something. They arrived at the bridge in the middle of the night, when the streetlights no longer illuminated enough for footsteps to be heard. Only darkness and the faint light from distant lamps. The elderly woman didn't say anything, just placed the music box down beside me, then sat next to me. The young woman stood, her hand draped over the old woman's arm as if trying to keep her from getting lost. I stared at the box. It was unlike any music box I'd ever seen. It was made of oak, old and worn, and the lid was engraved with a faint image of a woman dancing, her arms outstretched as though trying to touch the sky. I didn't ask, but the elderly woman seemed to know what I was thinking. "This is my mother's music box," she began, her voice hoarse as though she'd spoken too many words that no one had heard. "All my life, this box has never played the right tune. But my mother told me that when I came to this bridge, if it played music, it would be a sign of an ending." The young woman bent down and opened the box. Broken sounds filled the air, like the murmurs of a time long past. I listened, trying to recognize the melody, but it wasn't music. It was a series of fragmented notes, as though it were trying to connect with a song long forgotten. "My mother passed away 3 years ago," the elderly woman continued. "She said that when she was gone, the box would play, and she would come back to say goodbye. But my mother never came back." The young woman turned to me, her eyes filled with concern. She didn't speak, but the silence was enough for me to understand this wasn't a simple story. They weren't here to find someone, but to find something lost, never fully formed, and now perhaps only a dream. The elderly woman sighed softly, her hand resting on the music box. "I don't know if this box can help me understand anything," she said, her voice almost a silent plea. "But I believe, if I don't find anything here, at least I've tried." I sat quietly, saying nothing more. The wind blew across the bridge, making soft whistling sounds, as if the bridge itself were listening. And then, in the midst of that silence, something miraculous happened. The music box began to play a clear, gentle melody, full of life. An old song, no longer the broken notes, but a full tune, rich in melody, as though the memories of the elderly woman's mother had finally come alive. The sweet notes filled the air, surrounding us, and I felt as if a part of time itself was returning. The elderly woman closed her eyes, her hand clutching the box tightly. The young woman stepped back a bit, giving her space, but her eyes shone with a quiet happiness. There were no words, only music, and the peacefulness in each breath. The music box wasn't just an old object. It was a bridge between the past and the present, between generations that had passed and those who remained. And in that moment I understood. Sometimes, the things we think are lost are the very things that still exist, if only we're patient enough to listen. When the music box finally stopped playing, the elderly woman smiled softly and said to me, "Thank you. Now I know my mother didn't leave me. She's just been waiting for me to come to the right place to understand that she's always been with me." They left the bridge, the music box safely tucked in the elderly woman's hands. The young woman took her hand, guiding her through the faint glow of the streetlights, and I stayed behind, listening to the wind that still echoed. The old bridge in Savannah returned to its quiet stillness. But I knew that on this bridge, there were stories that never ended. Memories that had never been lived, now brought to life once again. And sometimes, all it takes is an old music box to bring someone back to themselves. The strange key. That night, the old bridge in Savannah felt like an elderly being full of memories. Silent, yet full of mystery. I had sat there for hours, watching the streetlights slowly fade into the mist and listening to the sound of the water lapping against the shore. The night was very still, but before long, a stranger appeared, stepping into my life as if he had been waiting for a long time to reach this bridge. He didn't carry an old music box or a guitar, only a key. An old key with a shiny brass finish, but scratched and worn as if it had passed through many hands over the years. He didn't look at me right away. Instead, he walked up to the bridge, sat down on a nearby bench, and held the key as though it were something of utmost importance. I had noticed him from the moment he stepped onto the bridge. He was tall, wearing a long black coat, his hair a little long and messy, but his eyes were bright and sparkling, as if he had just returned from a long journey. When he sat down, I couldn't help but look at the key in his hand. After a moment, he looked up at me, as if he knew exactly what I was watching. "I suppose you're wondering about this key," he said, his voice hoarse gentle. I didn't respond, only nodded slightly. He smiled, then sighed, resting the key on his lap. "It doesn't belong to me," he continued. "I found it in an old wooden box while I was cleaning out a house in Charleston. The house had been abandoned for a long time, and in a cupboard under the stairs, I discovered this key. There was no paper, no explanation, just the key. But I felt like I had to bring it here, to this bridge." I remained silent, but a sense of curiosity began to stir within me. "Do you know what this key opens?" I asked. He looked up at me, his eyes seeming to see something in the darkness of the bridge, something that I couldn't see. "I don't know," he said, a hint of uncertainty in his voice, "but there's this strange feeling. When I touched the key, I felt like I had known it for a very long time. And I think maybe it will open something very important." He stood up, holding the key in his hand, and walked toward the railing of the bridge. I stood up too, unsure of what to do. But there was a strong feeling within me that I couldn't let him be alone on the bridge. He approached the railing, gazing down at the river, black as ink. The wind blew through, sweeping fallen leaves across the surface of the bridge. He placed the key on the railing, as though waiting for something. Have you ever felt like you missed something big in your life? He asked, without looking at me. I didn't answer right away, but that feeling, I understood it. The feeling of always being incomplete, as if a part of me had been left behind long ago. I think sometimes the things we miss are the things that can never be grasped, I said. He nodded, then suddenly turned back, holding the key out to me. Do you want to keep it? He asked, his eyes lighting up like a sudden flash of lightning. Maybe you're the only one who can figure out what this key will open. I looked at the key, feeling its weight, but I didn't want to take it. It wasn't mine. It wasn't what I was looking for. Thank you, but I think it won't open anything for me, I replied. He stared at me for a long while, then smiled, as if he understood. He tucked the key into his pocket, then turned and walked away. Before leaving the bridge, he stopped, looked back at me. Maybe one day you'll know. By then, the key will have found its true owner. He disappeared into the misty night. The bridge returned to its silence, and I remained seated, the key that wasn't mine still lingering in my thoughts. Since that day, I still don't know what the key opens, but I've come to understand that some things in life don't need to be understood right away. Sometimes you just need to keep going, keep searching, and one day, we'll find the key to unlock the door we need to open. The old bridge in Savannah still stands strong, and it will always hold untold stories, keys, strangers, and memories that were never lived. They all have a reason to exist. The strange lantern. The old bridge in Savannah has never been a place of complete silence. Even in the late hours of the night, when the winds blow through the oak trees by the shore, there are still figures passing by, as if they are searching for something lost, or simply looking for a place to sit and listen to their own story. I had been sitting on my usual stone bench for hours, my eyes fixed on the dark river, where the faint ripples of the water reflected the dim light from distant lamps. The night had no moon, and the bridge seemed to sink into the darkness. But in that moment, I did not feel lonely. I could sense the presence of ancient stories, like a gentle breeze carrying memories. Then, person approached, not someone I had seen before, but a figure carrying a strange lantern. The lantern was a pale yellow color, its light not glaring but flickering weakly, warm yet faint. The light did not come from an electric bulb, but from a small flame carefully placed in a glass lantern with an old metal casing. It felt as though this lantern had passed through many generations, witnessing countless stories. He stepped closer to me, said nothing, only paused for a moment before sitting on the stone bench beside me. A gentle breeze swept in, but the lantern's flame did not extinguish. Its warm yellow light made me feel as if there was life in this silent space. He didn't look at me immediately. He simply placed the lantern between us, then gazed at the flickering flame inside the lantern. The fire seemed very familiar to him, as if he and the flame shared a strange bond that I couldn't quite understand. After a long while, he spoke. "This bridge, it might be the only place where I can find a little peace." His voice was deep and soft, as if he was sharing something very personal. I didn't ask him who he was. I simply sat there and listened. This night didn't require rushing. "This lamp," he continued, gently stroking the lantern, "it's been with me for a long time. I don't know when exactly. I only know that when I was a child, my father brought it back from a long journey. At the time, he said it would light my way through the dark nights when I felt lost." He paused for a moment, then added, "But there's never been a real light bright enough to guide me out of the shadows within me. This lamp, it's like a memory, something that's been forgotten in life." He looked at me, his eyes filled with unspoken words. "And now I bring it here to this bridge, because I've heard that one day the flame in this lantern will guide me to a place where I no longer have to search." He didn't smile, but his gaze seemed to have found peace in this moment, even if only briefly. I didn't know if this lantern could help him find anything, but I understood that sometimes small, seemingly insignificant things can be life, can be hope for someone. "Maybe you've gone too far," I said softly. "Sometimes we carry too much, only to realize that when we turn back, we have nothing left." He nodded, his eyes sparkling as though he understood what I was trying to say. The light from the lantern remained faint, but in that moment, I felt like it was lighting an unknown path. A long while later, he stood up, lifted the lantern, and its small flame remained steady despite the strong wind. "Maybe this lantern will lead me to where I need to be. Thank you for listening." He smiled, then turned and walked away. I watched him, his eyes obscured by the darkness, but the lantern continued to shine steadfastly. The old bridge in Savannah returned to the darkness, but this time I didn't feel lost. Something had changed. It seemed that even in the dark, there was light, and sometimes that light came from simple things, old objects we never expected. As he disappeared into the night, I remained sitting there, listening to the rustling of the wind in the oak trees, and feeling that the stories were still waiting. This bridge was not just a physical bridge. It was a bridge connecting the past and the present, the lost and the remaining. Every person who came here carried a part of themselves, a piece of memory, and a piece of hope. The old bridge in Savannah continued to welcome untold stories, strangers carrying things left ununderstood. And I would continue sitting here, listening, waiting for the next story. The painting of the old bridge. That night was unlike any other on this bridge. A light mist covered everything, making it all feel mysterious, as if time had stopped or the bridge had become a place not of this world. I sat on my familiar stone bench, holding a warm cup, gazing at the lights on the bridge shimmering in the mist. From time to time, the wind would blow, and the sound of the water lapping against the shore made the space even quieter. But soon, I noticed a figure approaching from the distance. This time, it was a woman, carrying a black fabric bundle, looking light yet somehow very solemn. She walked across the bridge slowly, her eyes focused on the details of the bridge, as though searching for something forgotten. When she came closer to me, I noticed something different. She didn't look around or speak, but stared intently at the painting she was holding in her hands. It was a painting of the old bridge, but not with the current light. It was a painting from the past, capturing the bridge in another moment. The bridge had no electric lights or modern details, only a misty veil surrounding it, like a dreamscape from times long past. She didn't sit down but stood still, looking at the painting in her hands, as though searching for something within it. A memory or a feeling that only she could understand. "This bridge," she began, her voice soft but with a hint of resolve, as if she were speaking more to herself than to me. "I saw it in a dream many years ago, and in that dream, this bridge led me to a place I can't remember clearly, but I felt that it was where I belonged." I looked at her, unsure of what to say. She placed the painting on the stone bench beside me and sat down. "I painted this bridge," she continued, her eyes still fixed on the painting. "But the strange thing is, I can't remember the details in this painting. Everything in it feels like a vague memory, an image I've seen but can't quite grasp." I looked at the painting, and then a strange feeling washed over me. There was something about it that made me feel as though it had been familiar for a long time. Each stroke, every curve of the bridge, carried a sense of distance, as if I had stood there once in another life. She turned to look at me, and I began to understand that there was some connection between her and this bridge that I couldn't quite explain. "Every time I see this bridge in my dreams," she said, her voice trembling, "I see someone standing here, someone I can't recognize, but I feel as though I've known them very well, and I think if I paint this bridge I might find them once again." I didn't know what to say. What she said seemed strange, but there was a deep truth in it that I couldn't deny. There are memories, feelings that cannot be explained with words, only felt with the heart. She continued, "I've been here a long time ago, but every time I return, I feel like I'm lost. I don't know who or what I'm searching for, only that there is something very important hidden here, and I must find it." The painting in her hands seemed to speak the words she hadn't fully voiced. Everything on this bridge seemed to become more hazy and magical, as though it were a place where lost memories and lingering souls met. After a while, she stood up and looked at the bridge. The way she seemed to recognize something here kept me from looking away. The painting of the bridge remained on the bench, and the dim light from the lamps pierced through the mist, making the space even more mysterious than ever. "Maybe I'll never find that person," she sighed, "but at least I know that I found a part of the memory in this painting. And maybe what's important isn't finding them, but learning to live with those memories." She folded the painting, placed it back into the fabric bundle, and walked away, her eyes still on the bridge, as if the bridge would always be her place, no matter how vague that memory was. As she disappeared into the night, I sat there, looking at the old bridge with its faint lights, and the feeling that perhaps one day I would understand something about this place, about the old bridge in Savannah, where so many untold stories are waiting. The old notebook. The night continued to pass silently, with the light from the bridge's lamps faintly reflecting on the surface of the Savannah River, creating sparkling dots like falling stars. The bridge, with its weathered paint and worn steps, maintained its peaceful appearance, though each step seemed to carry a story, a memory, a fragment of time. I sat there, not knowing how long, listening to the wind rustling through the oak trees, as if the bridge itself were whispering words that had never been spoken. Suddenly, I noticed a figure approaching from the end of the bridge. This time it was a man, appearing older, with silver hair and a weathered face. He wore a thick coat, but his eyes carried an odd tranquility, as if he had traveled many roads and understood things others could not see. What caught my attention wasn't his appearance, but the notebook he held in his hands. It was a small notebook, its leather cover worn, with the corners frayed by time, yet it seemed to contain something very important to him. He walked across the bridge, each step sure, and when he reached me, he paused for a moment, looking at the painting of the old bridge that the woman had made earlier. I didn't say anything, but the feeling that he had seen many things on this bridge made me curious. Finally, he spoke, his voice deep and decisive. "I suppose you're wondering about this notebook," he said, his gaze directed at me, as though he already knew I was curious. I gently nodded, and he smiled, as if he had already anticipated my response. "This notebook," he began, his voice as though following distant memories. "It has been with me my entire life. When I was a child, my father gave it to me and told me to write down everything I saw on this bridge. The stories of the people who passed by, the memories they carried, and the whispers that only the bridge could hear." He opened the notebook, flipped through a few pages, and showed me some handwritten lines, faded with time. Names of people, vague details, and sometimes short paragraphs describing strange moments that travelers on the bridge had experienced. Each page contained untold stories, unknown people. "These are strangers," he said, his voice soft but heavy. "People who have passed through this bridge, leaving their traces, even if just for a moment. But to me, they are not strangers. They are pieces of life that I must understand, must record." He paused, as though considering something. "There is something strange," he continued, his eyes seeming to look through me, into things unsaid. "The names in this notebook never repeat, but each person has something in common. They all stood here on this bridge at some point in their lives, and each one carried something unresolved." I felt that there was something very profound in his words. This bridge was not just a physical place. It was where stories, memories, and strangers met, only to disappear again into the darkness. He flipped through a few more pages in the notebook, then stopped, his eyes fixed on a name, as though searching for something. "This is the name of someone I met last year," he said, his eyes lighting up in a strange way. "Someone I have never forgotten. She told me that this bridge would take her to a place she could never return to. And when she left, I never saw her again." He closed the notebook and looked at me. "This bridge is not a place to go, but a place to return to. Everyone who passes through here carries a part of the past, and this bridge, with all its memories, holds on to those parts. If you are one of those who can see, you will understand what I mean." He stood up, tucked the notebook into his coat, and turned to leave, saying nothing more. As he walked away, I didn't feel sadness or loneliness, but a strange feeling, as though I had just been shown a door I had never noticed before. The old bridge in Savannah stood still, like a silent witness to all the untold stories, the strangers carrying memories, and the footsteps that never stopped, continued to wait as an indispensable part of the lives of those searching for something they could never forget. The small wooden box. The bridge lay still in the darkness, its dim lights reflecting a yellow glow on the river's surface, creating soft streaks of light that glided over the water. The night had grown late, and the air seemed quieter than ever, with only the sound of footsteps from those wandering in search of memories, or perhaps the souls passing through this bridge, never to return. I sat there, my mind still full of thoughts about the stories that had been told, the strange encounters. As I was lost in my own musings, another figure appeared. A man, short and seemingly elderly, walked across the bridge. His coat looked worn, but each step was steady, as if he was very familiar with this path. I couldn't help but notice the small wooden box he carried in his hand. It was simple, made of raw wood with visible scratches. The box seemed to have existed for centuries, and although small, it carried a strange allure, as if it contained something very important. He stopped beside the bench where I sat and looked at me slowly, as if he had known me for a long time. "I suppose you're wondering about this box," he said, his voice low and firm, but with a hint of gentleness, as though accustomed to questions from others. I simply nodded, not speaking, but I could feel that there was something very different in the air. He placed the box gently into my hands, a soft, meaningful gesture. "This is the box I found many years ago," he continued, his gaze fixed on the box as if he were looking into a distant memory. It has been with me all these years, like a secret I've never dared to open. But today I think I am ready. I looked at the box in my hands, a strange sense of curiosity and anxiety rising within me. The wooden box, with its old metal lock, seemed to hold something that people had tried to keep hidden. Do you know why people put important things into boxes like this? He asked, his voice as though searching for an answer not just from me, but from himself as well. I didn't answer immediately, just gazed at the box as though it could explain everything. After a moment of silence, I spoke. Perhaps it's because the most important things need to be protected, not easily seen. But is it really safe? When it's time to open it, will there be anything left to protect? He smiled gently, a smile full of understanding. That's a good question, he said. But sometimes you have to open it to realize that the things you keep inside are the very things you can no longer hide. This box, it's not just a container for an object, it's part of my journey. Every time I felt afraid, I closed the box again, only to continue on. I listened, feeling that his words weren't just reflections, but things he had lived through. His life seemed to have been marked by this wooden box. I've been to many places, he continued, his eyes tracing the bridge, where old memories might still linger. But no matter where I go, I always feel like this bridge holds a part of me, a part that can never be erased. And perhaps, if I open this box, I will find the answer to what I've been searching for all these years. He slowly opened the box, his hands trembling from the years that had passed. And then, inside, I saw a small, simple object, but one that carried an indescribable value. It was an old pocket watch, its face yellowed with age and its surface scratched and fading. It seemed very old, yet it held a strange beauty, as if it had witnessed precious moments from a time long past. This is the only thing I have left from the past, he said, his voice dropping. The thing I've searched for all these years, but could never forget. This watch belonged to the one I loved, who was lost on a rainy night, right here on this bridge. He paused, as if burying part of the past that could no longer be spoken of. And when he closed the box, I felt a silence envelop us. The bridge, with its twinkling lights and the whispering wind, seemed like a silent witness to all the untold stories. I looked at him one last time, saying nothing, but deep inside, I knew that this bridge would continue to hold the memories yet to be told, the stories still waiting to be revealed. And perhaps, as he said, each box, each object, each memory, carries within it an important part of the journey we must go through to find the answers for ourselves. The old map, the old bridge, where stories never end, still stands silent in the middle of the Savannah River. The night is as dark as ink, with only the yellow lights reflecting on the still water, painting a mysterious picture of space. The bridge seems like a quiet witness of time, each mark, each breeze, each footstep holding a story. I sat there for a moment, still holding the small wooden box the man had just given me, feeling the things that were left unsaid, the secrets still hidden. But as I listened to the stillness of the night, another figure appeared from afar. A tall, weathered man, walking across the bridge like a shadow from the past. What was different about him was that in his hands, he didn't carry a box or a notebook like the others, but an old, faded map, worn by time. The map, rolled up and tightly bound with a leather string, seemed like something very precious, but battered by time and travel. The man walked without haste, each step light but full of determination, as if he was very familiar with every nook and cranny of this path. As he approached, I could sense a heaviness in the air, as if he were carrying a burden that no one else could understand. He stopped in front of me, his gaze sharp but also tinged with weariness. After a few seconds of silence, he gently placed the map on the bench beside me. "This is an old map," he said, his voice low and somewhat mysterious. "It doesn't just lead to somewhere. It leads to something I've been searching for all these years." I looked at the map, its faint lines and fading symbols, but I could still see it pointed to a place, not far away, but right here in the heart of Savannah. "Do you know," he continued as if about to share a secret, "old maps like this are never just tools for directions. They are markers of things that have been forgotten, places that people once visited, but then they were lost. Places that might hold untold stories, truths we're afraid to face." I looked up at him, sensing that the words he spoke weren't just idle thoughts, but things he had lived through, things he truly understood. I couldn't help but feel a curiosity about the secrets this map might lead to. "What are you searching for on this map?" I asked, my voice quiet but full of curiosity. He took a deep breath, his eyes becoming distant, as if he were looking far away. "I'm searching for a place I've heard about since I was a child. A place where my father, my grandfather, and many others in my family once went. They said that place holds something very valuable, something that, if found, would change a person's life forever." I couldn't help but feel a strange sense of excitement. What could be on this map that held such power? "It's a place that's been forgotten," he continued, his eyes still fixed on the map. "It's not in the books. No one knows about it, but I believe it still exists. And this bridge, I believe, is the key." The name "this bridge" echoed in my mind, as if everything was connected to this place, where strange stories kept unfolding. The old map in his hands was not just a tool for directions. It was part of a journey, part of a quest that would never end. He looked at me again, as if assessing whether I had the patience and courage to accept this story. "I cannot go on alone," he said, his voice now softer, as if opening up to a friend. "I need a companion, someone who understands that sometimes, in old stories, there are secrets we cannot ignore." This bridge is where it all begins. But I cannot go on by myself. I looked at him, silent for a few seconds, but in my heart, I already knew my answer. Perhaps this journey wasn't just about him, but about me, about everything this bridge was holding in secret. I will go with you, I said, my voice steady, though my heart was still filled with uncertainty. But we must understand that what we find might change everything we know. He smiled, as if he had already known this would be the answer. That's what I hoped for, he said, then looked at the map one last time. This bridge has brought us here, and now it will lead us farther, to a place that only those who dare face the past can find. With the map in hand, we began to walk, leaving the old bridge behind, but I knew that this journey was only just beginning. The secrets, the stories, and the changes we would face were all waiting ahead. What will we find on the path from the bridge? Perhaps a long-forgotten treasure, or simply untold stories. But surely, everything will never be the same again.
you.